Hello, my friends. Let's dive right into a recap of the past week. It's reported that over the last 7 days, the Russians managed to capture 82.5 square kilometers. That's still a lot, but nearly half as much as they were capturing before. So the pace of their advance has slowed again. However, if we include the gray zone, the total territory taken comes to 98 square kilometers. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian forces succeeded in liberating 3 square kilometers, or almost 6 if you count the gray zone. So the fight remains as intense as ever. Let's move straight to the front line, and after that, we'll look at some very interesting news. Today, we'll begin with the Pokrovsk direction, since some very notable developments are taking place there. Russian sources are already claiming that their forces have entered the northern outskirts of Novoekonomichne. At the same time, attacks have started on Rozhine and Novotoretske. This breakthrough has caused the situation to deteriorate quickly, which is why General Sirsky traveled to Pokrovsk to see what was happening. After his visit, a new direction was officially recognized: the Dobropillia direction. Here is what he had to say. Another day on a working trip to the units defending Donetsk region. Our soldiers are repelling fierce Russian attacks every day in the Novopavlivka, Pokrovsk, Kramatorsk, and Toretsk directions. Fighting continues in the new Dobropillia direction. The Russians are pushing toward Kostiantynivka, but aside from heavy losses, they have achieved nothing. So now we have what's been called the Dobropillia direction. And if the Russians are now openly declaring attacks on Novotoretske, it suggests they are planning to push toward Dobropillia. Friends, let me know your thoughts in the comments, but maybe there is something to this theory. The defensive lines are clearly visible near the towns of Rodinske, Beletske, and of course around Pokrovsk. But if you look from Novotoretske toward Dobropillia, you'll see that only one small defensive line has been identified north of the main highway. This means the Russians might try to break through in that area from where today's battles are happening, Novotoretske. It's just 17 kilometers in a straight line to the outskirts of Dobropillia. So the situation here is developing in a very interesting way. As for the results, today, according to official sources, the Russians are continuing the attacks on Koptive, advancing toward Novoekonomichne and storming Myroliubivka, Promень, Lysivka, and Udachne. We're still waiting for confirmation from the Ukrainian side on whether the Russians have actually advanced. Meanwhile, troops on the ground are reporting that Russian FPV drones are already operating in Dnipropetrovsk region, which is a worrying sign. In the Novopavlivka direction, the situation is also deteriorating rapidly. The Russians have claimed control over the village of Novoukrayinka. If this is confirmed, it's likely that very soon they'll be able to straighten the front line along the Dnipropetrovsk region and continue push toward Novopavlivka. The village of Dachne is already effectively in the gray zone, so the advance continues in this area. According to the general staff, the Russians are also storming Yalta and Zirka, although Russian sources are claiming they've already captured Zirka. Fighting continues on the outskirts of Oleksiivka, and the Russians are storming Horihove and attempting to break through toward Novopavlivka across open fields. For now, we're still waiting for official updates on the frontline status. In the Velika Novosilka direction, battles continue over the village of Shevchenko, though full occupation of the village hasn't yet been confirmed. Russian forces are also pushing toward Novosilka, and now Russian military bloggers are claiming they're breaking through toward the village of Maliivka. That suggests that gray zone may be expanding in this area as well. For now, we'll have to wait and see how the situation unfolds. In the Gulay-Pole direction, the Russians continue the assaults on Malinivka and Arshalin-Zaliznichne. However, they've had no success along the front line here, so the situation remains unchanged for now. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, attacks are ongoing on the village of Kamianske. At the same time, heavy shelling continues across the entire frontline area. However, the Russians haven't managed to advance. Over the past 24 hours, the frontline remains unchanged. Meanwhile, Russian military bloggers released a video allegedly showing that they advanced to the center of Kamianske. And the Russian flag is in the very center of Kamianske on the Zaporizhzhia front. Ukrainian analysts geolocated the flag's position and marked it on the map. Near the bridge in the center of Kamianske, the Russians took down the Ukrainian flag and raised the Russian tricolor. They write. These gains are not significant, but they're trying to inch forward nonetheless. In the Kherson direction, the Russians have halted all offensive operations near the Antonivskyi Bridge, although shelling continues along the right bank of the Dnipro River. Over the past 24 hours, there have been no changes along the front line. Now let's move to the Kostiantynivka direction. Here, the Russians continue the assaults, although the activity has slightly decreased. This is likely because they are preparing new reserves, regrouping, and most likely planning a wave of new attacks in the near future. Their goal is to break through the last defense lines approaching Kostiantynivka. For now, battles are ongoing in Chasiv Yar, and the Russians are pushing toward Bila Gora, attacking Yablonivka and Popiv Yar. Heavy shelling also continues, but so far the front line remains unchanged. Soldiers on the ground describe their situation like this. The Russians are increasing their use of Shahed drones on our positions. The effective deployment in this sector has become routine. In addition, Russian aircraft are hitting the town of Kostiantynivka itself. The Russians are also aggressively advancing south of Bila Hora, conducting motorized assaults and moving through tree lines. Our troops are hitting them with FPV drones and not letting them get near the village. It's clear the Russians want to engage in battles for Bila Hora. That night, a Ukrainian soldier reported that Russian forces are gradually taking new positions along various sections of the front. Kostiantynivka direction. The Russians have once again managed to sneak onto the outskirts of Popiv Yar and are trying to hold their ground. Around Poltavka, the situation remains unchanged. Near Rusin Yar, our troops are holding back the Russians. Yablonivka is hell on earth. Russian bastards are concentrating their biggest efforts there, and it's very difficult to stop them. The Russians are also trying to break through from Romanivka and Zorya toward Alexandro Kalinova and attempting a flanking move from the east toward the Klebanbyk reservoir. That reservoir is a serious natural barrier to the southern approaches to Kostiantynivka. Expect very intense fighting over it. In the Koptiva area, the Russians made gains near the village, as well as in the direction of Novotoretske. Other sectors remain mostly unchanged. As usual, reinforcements were sent to this direction at the last possible moment, and that's helped slow the Russians. No more multi-kilometer gains per day. However, what's happening northeast of Toretsk is alarming. Even though the Russian advance has seemingly slowed down, the situation is very dangerous. The Russians have reached open terrain to Berbila Hora and Alexandru Shultine. In the Siversk direction, Russian activity has significantly increased. The Russians are storming Serebrenka and, according to their own claims, have already broken into the village. Attacks also continue near Grigorivka, Vernyu Kamianske, and Vyimka. Troops on the ground say the situation is extremely difficult. A dark cloud hangs over Serebrenka. The fighting is non-stop. The Russians are trying to crush the village but are suffering massive losses. Our guys are counterattacking their position, and troops in the forest to the north are helping contain the assault, preventing the Russians from advancing along the Siversky Donets River. Also, east of Siversk, the Russians are wandering freely along the stream, making isolated raids to try and reach our positions. At night, they camouflage themselves well, making them almost invisible. Special attention must be paid to this area because they may slip through and cause real damage. In the Liman direction, Russian forces continue the assaults on the villages of Zarychne, Yampolivka, and Zelena Dolina. Fighting near the village of Ridkodub also hasn't stopped. It's likely that the Ukrainian forces are still conducting counterattacks, although there are no official reports confirming this. In addition, offensive actions toward Rozhine continue. However, there have been no changes on the front line over the past 24 hours. Ukrainian soldiers have successfully repelled all attacks. In the Borova direction, Russian forces are still storming Zeleny High, pushing near Raigorodka and assaulting Novoyegorivka. Even rear positions are under constant shelling and FPV drone activity remains very high. Despite this, there have been no shifts in the front line during the past day. In the Kupiansk direction, Russian forces still haven't managed to secure the northern flank above the city. They continue the assaults on Holubivka and are pushing forward from Stepova Novoselivka. As for Redkivka village, Ukraine's general staff hasn't confirmed any loss of the settlement. Over the past 24 hours, there have been no changes to the front line. In the Dvorichna area, assaults on Kutkivka are ongoing. Once again, Russian troops are crossing the border and trying to break through into the village of Stroyevka. However, the Ukrainian forces are preventing them from gaining a foothold, and the front line remains unchanged over the past day. In the Kharkiv direction, overall activity remains low, but Russian forces continue assault on the village of Gliboke, attempting to fully capture it and push as close as possible to the town of Liptsi from the north. This would help them launch more effective attacks on Liptsi, since they've so far failed to break through from the east. In the Vovchansk area, assaults are ongoing, and last night Russian sources claimed they improved their positions. We are currently waiting for confirmation or denial of this claim. in the Sumy direction. Russian forces continue offensive operations but haven't made any significant gains. The Ukrainian forces have stabilized the situation and the front line remains unchanged over the past 24 hours. However, Russian assault activity remains very high, around 20 attacks reported in a single day. And yesterday, during his evening address, President Zelensky announced that he had signed a decree concerning the Convention on the Prohibition of Anti-Personnel Mines.
Today I signed a decree to enact the decision of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council regarding the Ottawa Convention. This is the convention banning anti-personnel mines. Russia has never been a party to this convention and cynically continues to use such mines not only now, in the war against Ukraine. This is the trademark of Russian killers, to destroy life by every means they have: chemical weapons, ballistic missiles, including medium-range rockets, and of course, various types of mines, including anti-personnel ones. And fortunately, yes, we see how our neighbors in Europe are reacting to this threat. We are also aware of the legal difficulties involved in exiting agreements during wartime. Still, we are taking this political step to send a clear signal to all our partners about where the focus should be.
Meanwhile, it appears that the conflict between Israel and Iran is far from over, as Iran is now calling on the United Nations to hold the US and Israel accountable. We officially request that the Security Council recognize the Israel regime and the United States as initiators of this act of aggression and hold them accountable for their consequences, including the payment of compensation and reparations, wrote Iranian Foreign Minister uh, Abbas Araghchi in a letter to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Iran also issues a direct warning regarding Donald Trump. An Iranian publication reported that any threat to their supreme leader is considered equivalent to hostility against God. In particular, Ayatollah Khamenei stated, any attack on a Shia Maria and the leader of the Islamic Ummah is considered an attack on the pillars of Islam and on the lives of all Muslims, and it will receive a harsh and devastating response from the faithful people of Islamic Iran and all freedom seekers around the world. Meanwhile, the IAEA has issued a new warning. Iran could resume uranium enrichment within just a few months, the IAEA reported. According to The Guardian, despite US strikes causing significant damage to Iran's nuclear facilities, some of the infrastructure remains intact. IAEA Director Rafael Grossi said, I'd say within a few months they could restart multiple centrifuge cascades to enrich uranium, or even sooner. However, Donald Trump continues to insist the sites were effectively destroyed. In an interview with Fox News, the US president said, it's very hard to do, very dangerous, very difficult. It's a complex operation. We didn't warn them. They didn't know we were coming. No one expected us to hit that site. They tried to block the entrance to the storage, but our bomb still went through like butter. Okay, time will tell how the situation unfolds. What do you think about this? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.